It's Miss Allison. I feel like we need to take another deep breath. That is a super intense story that you guys read with the lottery. We are not reading about like rainbow and sunshine these days, are we? Okay, so let's break down our learning target for this story. You guys were trying to figure out what the symbols meant in the lottery, and we know that a symbol is an object that stands for more than itself. So I'm going to very quickly go through some annotations here. You can see that I've just marked a couple things that I thought, I wonder if that could mean more. So for instance, summer is in there. The stones are in there quite a bit. We have a couple different names that pop up that we're going to talk about. The black box, that was a big one. That object kept coming up and kept coming up. I wonder what it could mean, right? We had to think about what is it past itself. We saw a lot of different colors in this story. Those are really symbolic as well. The paper, we'll talk about that. So this is just me kind of quickly going through what I found, and we're going to break it down. So there's more to that. When we think about symbols again, it's what is the object and what could it mean? So here are some symbols that we saw in the story. So we know the black box, like we talked about, the color black is in there a lot. The stones, the chips of wood are in there. We have the box, we have the village square, all of those things, and the coal. All of those things are important. There were also some names. We're not going to get to talk about all of them, but there were some names in there that were also very important, like the Summers, the Graves, all of those things add up. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. When we think about that black box where they kept all of the papers for the lottery, a couple of things we want to think about. When we think about our connotation, what we feel when we see a word, usually darker colors we think about maybe with darker things like death or that kind of thing. So we can think, okay, that's interesting that they chose that exact color for this. Also, why can't we see in it, right? So what is in there? Some people will argue it represents a coffin because we know the outcome later, or just like something secret, right? And we also know that on the slips of paper, there's kind of a stark contrast between the lighter color and the darker color. So people can talk a little bit more about that or have interpreted that as being maybe a sign of something bad to come or something like that, right? Okay, awesome. So some other things, we know that the stones, those are universal symbols for punishment. Those are used as kind of a heavy thing, right? They actually are really heavy too, probably depending on what size you're holding, but it's more of a heavy symbol within this because it represents that tradition and that ritual, which we learn about later. But in general, we know that those are not going to be like a positive symbol in literature. The chips of wood, really interesting to think about too. We have a lot of natural elements, and we think about why are they using these things? Like, first of all, why are they torturing each other? Not okay. But second of all, why these things? And so with that, we can think about the fact that maybe those rituals are going way, way back into the past, right? We have primitive roots because we're using primitive material for these things, okay? The village square, that could be a couple of different things in there, but that's like where the people gather, right? It's community, that kind of thing. We also talked about the names. So like, for instance, Summers. It's happening in June. We have Mr. Summers. He's like the happiest guy, right? He is there to contrast like and show, I guess, the happy, joyful parts of life and contrast people like the Graves, right? Whose name is literally grave, or Mr. Warner, who was warning the town of what is to come, right? So there's just some interesting things there. Like we talked about the Graves, right? Obviously, we have death with that. We have an undertone that they are in there. He says things gravely. It's a contrast between the two, just like it is for the characters. We think it's a happy day, a cool ritual, turns into something horrible, right? The last one, like we said, Mr. Warner. He is 77 years old, which is interesting. 7 usually is a lucky number, and it shows that he has been able to avoid this ritual, right? And then we can go a little bit more into history if we kept looking at this, but really that's just a quick overview of the symbols in the lottery. There is so much more that packed in there, but that's the right track of thinking, how are those objects in there representing the overall meaning of the story, which we learned was tradition is maybe not always good. Don't blindly follow what's going on, right? Kind of every man for himself. We talked about those things in class. So hopefully this was helpful, and enjoy the rest of your day.